The Pleasant Grove City Council work session on this Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. We welcome everyone here. Diana will join us later, and we're grateful for the staff to be here. And we will turn our time over for our budget presentation. Oh, I'd like to make one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
About the game and everything. I think it's just the last time we took state in basketball was 1961, and is that one of your? And there was, well, I call him Coach Allred, and he's still here in Pleasant Grove, and Miller and Buckner, West, and Jay. Was Jay on that team too? I thought he was the year. So, well, he wasn't a senior though, was he?
No, they were.
But anyway, maybe it's just not in the cards because that was quite a team. I mean that old Coach Allred could do his hook shot down in the far corner, yeah, and make that. And so
61 is the year they took it.
I was 9 or 10 years old, and I can remember going to those games, and that gym was just packed solid every night they had a game.
So 58 years ago, 1961 is the last time they won it?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
And they've been in the championship the last 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, in the championship game the last 2 years. Gold Peak last year.
So anyway, but we'll just wait for another year now, but maybe it'll come sometime.
79, I think.
79, so.
No, they were 40.
So
Hey, the Red Sox went like 100 years before they got back to the World Series, so.
anyway,
Oh, I thought you said 79 years.
Oh, no. Yes, year 79.
Sorry, Marty. I thought you said 79 years. I'm like, no, only 40 years. Okay, I gotcha. I gotcha.
Okay. Okay, we're through with that, and that's, I'm glad you guys.
We still have soccer, their first game tonight, and they are ranked #1 to win again. And baseball, so we can still do Triple Crown this year with wrestling, baseball, and soccer.
Really?
So,
Coach Henry's got it.
Daniel, you know this.
Soccer players
plays in
are
any
tough.
weather. Yes.
Aren't they?
Where you're from, it's never this weather.
We play in rain, snow, sleet, hail, whatever it is in the spring. Yeah, we play and it's horrible.
Okay, back to our task here.
Right.
So, back on track.
Now we
Okay,
gotta hurry, so I need to go to the game, so let's go. Okay. I'm focused.
Scott.
All right, so for our work session today, we're going to focus on our budget. And Denise has some materials here. I'm just going to give you the overview. I'm going to turn it over to her. She's going to go through the numbers, and then we'll bring it back for a couple items of discussion. There are a couple items that we need to discuss. After you see the numbers, we'll discuss the custodial and how we're operating custodially as a city. We're going to talk a little bit about our library and a potential proposal to go fineless and what that means to us as a city. So, Sherry, we're going to have a philosophical discussion, and then that will turn into a numbers discussion. So the reason philosophically why we would want to do that, and then what that would mean to the budget. So we'll do that after we have two parts here on your one-pager. So this page here. The top part is the operational, and the bottom part is the capital. So we'll do operational first, then we'll talk about custodial and the library fineless issues. And then we need some feedback on the wage increase or whether we want to add a new position. So we'll talk about that and what the City Council's direction is there. And then after we're done with that discussion, we'll move to the capital side. And Denise will go what staff is recommending that we fund with our capital money. But we've also given you the master list. That's the color combination here. These are all the requests from the department heads. And so what's in green is what we're recommending be funded. What's in yellow is what we have figured out a way to fund outside of the capital projects budget. And then the white is not recommended for funding. So once we're done talking through capital, if there's some items that are in white that you would like to see that are currently in exchange for something that's in green, we won't necessarily have that discussion tonight because we're probably not going to have time. But you can bring that up when we have our next budget work session in April if there's some items that you would rather have funded other than what we're recommending. But we just wanted to make sure you had the master list. So as Denise goes through the numbers, we're not going to get into our discussion until after she goes through the numbers, and then I will stand up and then we'll have our discussion on some of the questions that we need feedback on regarding operations. So with that, I'll turn it to Denise.
Okay, so call it the one pager. So we're just going to talk a little bit on the left, on the top of the first sheet I have given you, is the revenue sources. Most of it in the taxes there is sales tax, but also a little bit of a property tax increase with the growth that we're having out there. We have about a 2.5% because we do get growth even if we don't raise our property tax rate.
So to clarify, we're not
Property tax, yeah.
We got it.
Yeah, and because we'll get our growth,
That's what
number.
happens when you build development.
Yeah.
So just briefly, is it still about a 60-40 split on?
Yeah, it's probably a little closer than that.
Okay.
I'll give you a number on that. I don't have them right here. And so all the other things are pretty small that we have, and we've talked about this in the past as far as building permit fees. We have all sorts of building permit fees coming in, but we don't, those are one-time monies really, because growth is building's gonna slow down eventually. So if you see the building permit fees, I have $31,200. We are going to allocate some of those dollars, and then we'll talk about them on the expense side. So I do have them using a little bit of that. We'll just talk through that. If you look at I had some budget reductions or transfer increases. I reduced the transfer to the pool. They're actually doing really good. They have a substantial fund balance, so they still have fund balance, and I think it's about $150,000. I'll email you guys that exact number. And so they don't need as much as a subsidy. We do want to have, because we do have improvements and stuff there. So this year we're going to just reduce that transfer a little bit. It's a $180,000 transfer. It's going down to, by 10. And then the transfer from the cemetery we're taking up a little bit. We're currently doing $38,000, and that's to help fund one full-time cemetery employee, but $50,000 doesn't even cover one full-time person. So those two cemetery full-time employees are actually paid out of the general fund. The part-time employees are paid out of the fund. So we're just going to take a little bit more from the cemetery to help pay for their full-time person.
Denise, sorry, go ahead, Sid. Well, I was just going to say, how are we on the cemetery? Is it a break even? Is it a?
No, they've got close to 200 in fund balance right now.
Okay, so when you say fund balance, was that
That's a reserve above and beyond. Yeah. So no, in the cemetery they get all their revenues, and then they have part-time employees, and then they have all their operationals, and then they're doing a transfer to storm drain of $75,000 to possibly pay for the land they're going to use, and then they're giving $50,000 to the general fund to help pay for the full-time employees. And
It's a person.
Well,
yeah.
Just so you understand the history, a few years back we increased the rates for cemetery with the understanding that any additional revenues we were going to put and keep into cemetery. And so we created their own special revenue fund at the time. And so over time, as we've sold some of these plots, we now have a reserve account, which we're using. One of the items in yellow is they're asking for a piece of equipment,
why I asked.
and we're just going to take it out of the cemetery fund balance and not out of the capital fund balance.
And they got a truck in the current fiscal year that we're in. They bought a dump truck. So that's pretty much on the left-hand side. So things are still looking good. The state of Utah has said in the last couple of months that they're seeing a flattening of sales tax or a leveling out of sales tax. So it's something we're going to want to look from a statewide perspective. On the right-hand side, as you can see, $450,000 just for the general fund. That's a 2% wage increase, and that's covering an insurance increase of 8.5%. And then you'll see right below that, I've just put what an additional 1% would cost the general fund, and that's about $107,000. But the 450 includes a 2% and 8.5% insurance increase. That means something down the road. So then you'll see software upgrades. The legal department and finance both have software issues that we're going to have to pay for. They're changing the software now. The cities have to pay for it. The TINA, that the county's been helping pay, or is it the state? I'm not sure. And then we are rolling out NatPay, as you probably all saw, for our checks. And then we are going to implement HR timekeeping in our current financial system. It was paid for years ago, so we own the module, but there's a cost every month once we implement the module. So that's what those numbers are. Pardon? Yeah, it'll be an app. It'll be an app with Cassell that already works with Cassell. Yeah.
Is this a yearly
amount? This is yearly ongoing. Yeah, because for the stuff with the
maintenance fees.
Yeah. So the next thing you'll see is we know that we're making with the recreation director. They'll be interviewing for that next couple of weeks. And they have 4 full-time employees and going to be looking at doing some wage adjustments with those 4 full-time people. The next is the contract planner.
Does that include the entire study at the rec, where it was part-time and full-time, or who was included with the wage study at the rec?
As far as I know, this is just going to be full-time.
So we haven't done the wage evaluation, but generally speaking, we've only done full-time when we've done these for all the departments. We will take a look at a couple of the permanent part-timers, but for some of the part-time positions are not, they're still subject to the 2% increase, but they're not necessarily part of the bigger study. So that's generally how we've done them in the past.
So contract planner, as many know, Julie, well, we just got a new full-time planner, but Julie did leave the city. What we're looking at is there is so much work there, and as long as building is like it is, then we'll use some of those building permit fees to hire a planner who's contract. So the extra
so we
work,
have already replaced Julie.
Yeah, Julie, we replaced Julie
With a full-time.
with a full-time person. This is just to help.
On contract.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then the building's done or slows down,
Okay.
that then we eliminate the contract.
Like
But
that.
The intent would be, because it would be contract, so we'll have our full-time employee, our city planner. We also have Daniel that does a lot of the planning stuff as development comes in. But one thing we found when Julie left was just the overwhelming nature of all the stuff we have happening, and we have really 2 people that are handling all that. And Daniel doesn't get to put his full-time into the planning because he's overseeing the whole department. So part of the solution is we didn't want to hire another person. And so we said, well, let's take some of this building money that we have, because the building, the foreseeable future in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to continue to see elevated revenues. Let's take a small portion of that. Let's get a contract planner. Now, it may be Julie. I mean, we've talked to her and asked her if she'd be interested. She'd be good because she already knows our systems and knows the city. But, you know, if she doesn't want to do it, then we would just open it up to find a contract planner that they would do so many hours, and there would be things that they could do maybe from home or whatever that they could do, that just to pick up some of the slack and the loose ends. Because every once in a while somebody comes back to us and says, you guys are slow, you're slow, you're slow. Well, the reason we're slow is because it's just a staffing issue for us. So this would help.
so next is we have a custodial contract, and we've earmarked $30,000. I know that Scott's going to talk a little bit about that after we're done with our numbers. The next is a part-time fire administrative assistant, and this is based on 30 hours a week. And pay is what we have other areas. Police have 2 part-time staff. Other areas have that, so it's based on that. We didn't cheer very loud. And then we talked about, there were actually 4 requests for full-time positions. A police officer, a parks position, and a cemetery position, and streets also asked for one. And so did the placeholder for the policeman, and then you'll see with all those requests, we're actually negative $30,000, so.
So we talked about dispatch. Did you say that includes dispatch for the full-time?
No, I didn't have, I didn't put any
We got
requests
a full-time dispatch.
last year's budget.
Because I thought, because we were given that study by one of the employees in the police, and so and we had talked about it at the retreat, so was that up for consideration, another full-time because of the turnover with the part-time, that we were considering hiring
Well,
another
so what the
full-time?
study contemplated was like 4 full-timers.
Well, I know, I'm just talking about one.
Yeah, and so no, we don't have that as a recommended option. If the city council wants to consider that, like I said, because we have a limited amount of money, we just have to determine. I mean, if dispatch got one last year, for us to give dispatch another employee where we have needs everywhere in the city, we don't. That's not something we'd recommend.
Just so I understand the math here. So 450 is a 2% increase. And the full-time positions, you've just added the 91.
I put the 91, the highest one in there, just to kind of show.
Not the park, cemetery, or
Yeah,
or
where we're,
roads.
and that,
Okay.
I just kind of put the larger number to show
And then with that,
what we
we're
were short.
with that we're short 30 grand.
30 grand, yeah.
One thing that we've done in the past that's been helpful is the directors requesting increased in full-time or positions kind of gave us a write-up of why it was justified or why they needed it.
Yeah.
Because for me, even though we gave a dispatch last year, if it's needed again or we've lost people, I mean, things could have happened within that year. I don't really like the idea that we need to be like necessarily equitable to the departments, because every department's different and their needs are different, and one department might have more needs than another. And so, but I need probably, before we make a big decision on this, some more detail from the department heads about why it's needed and the justification, and just, yeah, specifically on the full-time positions, because
And we'll add dispatch to that.
Yeah.
But so Chief Roberts, I mean, you'd recommend a police officer before dispatch?
and that's fine. We'd gotten the study and we talked about it in the retreat, so I wasn't sure if that was going to be on here or not. But I just think we need, because I want to be able to if people ask, or the public asks, why do we do this or that I have some reasoning as to why we hired different positions.
Yeah, and I forgot we had done that, because we have done that the last couple of years
I can do
at
that
the
easily.
council's request, and we can do that. We're not deciding tonight.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But if we can,
But we'll get that
okay,
information.
that would be helpful.
Well, I mean, he could be added on here, then it just has to be beside that, because streets is actually a general fund department, unless we use Class C road monies, then it's actually a general fund department. So it'd need, so it can go on here, and then it's just another piece of the general fund. That, all that money that's coming in, that's actually coming in just to the Class C road funds is where the tax, the additional tax. Mhm.
So that is not general fund, and
We can pay wages out
can.
of Class C.
We could, yeah, we can. We do a transfer from the general fund to Class C right now. If we wanted to do that, we could reduce. Class C would be probably the example that we could do, but that's if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, and so we don't have that listed, and I mean,
Yeah.
because we had discussion with Marty, and I don't remember the details why we pulled it, but
We
but we can put that back on there and then create the yeah.
do that.
Well, the funding source, but also the job description stuff, so
Yeah, I
the
can do
council
that
has an
easily.
idea, or what the needs are and what the ask is for and why.
Can you tell me on the wage increase was what was given last year to our
2%. We've done 2% the last.
And then a 0%.
No,
Yeah, well,
no, we did 0 2 years in a row.
and then-
How long ago?
I would say 2011, 2012 budget, and then we've done 2% every year since then. We might have had a 3% in there.
Did we think
early
that was
on.
the 15 year maybe? It's been 2% since I've been here, and this is
Yeah.
my fourth budget. I
It's pretty.
think.
We've done pretty much 2%.
Yeah.
We've proposed 3 before, 2.5 before, and as we've gone through the discussion, we've always brought it back down to 2.
Okay.
So I'll guide the discussion from here. Is there anything else specific on numbers for Denise, and then I'll bring her back up for the capital portion?
And like I said, I can get the narrative. That doesn't take me too long. I'll just get department directors give me.
What's our library fines? How much? Do you remember that?
We have a budget of 30,000 and we
personally?
brought in 23,000.
23 is our actual
18.
cash. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let me start with custodial as we talk about how we are currently operating, and then any direction that you'd like to give us on this. So right now we have 2 full-time employees, and with Dean being the one that is overseeing the custodial division, essentially. He's the one that oversees the part-timers, and then we just added a new full-timer last year with the intent of that being dedicated to the rec center. So Dean does some rec center stuff as far as actual cleaning, but he's also charged with supervising the other employees, and then we have the new full-timer that came in last year that is specific just to the rec center. I don't. John, thank you. I mean, it is a person that has a name, John. And then we have a part-timer that does the library. We have a part-timer that does admin and police. The fire department takes care of their own. We're working on some equipment needs to help with that, but for the most part, they clean their own facility. And then Public Works has somebody that cleans out there. So that's, yeah.
So that person out there is part of Dean's part-time staff?
Yes. We currently do not contract anything. Right. What we're recommending is on the new police and courts building that we contract that out. And we give that a test run and we see how that works. And so we don't know, we have a placeholder of 30,000. We're getting ready to go to RFP on that to really get to what our price is. But that's what we're recommending to you, is that we go contract with that. It was brought up in our retreat that the department heads could manage the custodial for each of their departments. As I've talked with the department heads, they would rather that Dion continues, and Dean, that they continue to run all the custodial centrally so that they don't have to worry about it. Their comment was, we're okay as long as there's somebody good that's cleaning our building. We don't necessarily want to manage that person or worry about all that, but when we get somebody that's not doing a very good job, then we need to make sure that change happens or whatever we need. Right now we're in a good cycle with our employees, our part-timers. They're doing us a good job. I think people are happy as far as the staff is concerned, but that's how we currently operate, and that's what we're recommending, that we continue down that path, with the exception now of the new building having contracting that out.
How long has that RFP been out?
It hasn't been out yet.
Oh, it's not?
Yeah.
How long are we going to have that out for?
Usually we do it probably for like 2 or 3 weeks or so. I mean, we should have a number.
So is that full-time custodial at the police building or part-time?
No, so it's because it's contract.
contract?
They're going to come back and say it's going to take us X amount of hours to do what you need, and here's what we're going to charge.
We're just kind of estimating the 30,000.
Yeah.
It's both buildings.
Yes. Well, no, not the fire department.
Just
Police and courts. I mean, it's one building,
Right.
but 2 different areas. But they would do both.
And then if that goes well, we could look at doing that in other departments in the city.
Potentially. And I think that's part of what we're looking at is, I mean, a lot of us have experience in working with other cities and really flip-flopping between in-house and contract. In the previous city I was in, we switched twice. So we were in-house, we went contract. Contract went good for 6 months, and then they started slacking on us, and so then we went back in-house. And so, you know, if the contract's doing a good job, there's no worries. I mean, we're paying something that's getting taken care of. If they start struggling, then we have to have that discussion on how do we want to hire another company in contract, or do we want to go back to providing it in-house?
Scott, in your experience, is it cost?
Generally speaking, yes. You might pay a touch bit more to have your own people, but your control. So, for instance, there's a spill in the lobby, and your contract people are gone. Yeah. Then who's going to clean that up? When you have somebody in-house, you just call them up and say, hey, we need somebody to go clean up that spill in the lobby. When it's the contract company, it's like, yeah, we'll see you tonight at midnight, you know. And so there's we just have more control with the in-house.
I will say that in my
kind of a helper that can do that stuff. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So
Let us know.
yeah, so that's the direction we're
That's good.
heading. If you're okay with
Yeah,
that,
that's
that's the direction we're gonna go. And then, I mean, we'll see how it works. If it's phenomenal and if it can save us substantial money, then we probably ought to consider changing our dynamic. It's just that when we make that change, it is a fundamental shift. We would be talking about employees that would no longer be here. So we're not suggesting that now. That's just a discussion we can have in the future, but we kind of want to test this out.
Time to test
I
it.
would be interested.
I'm sure we can have that discussion. So, I think what you're suggesting is what I have in my mind is we test them out, and if this is really working, then we sit down with them and say, okay, here's these other facilities, here's how big they are. The thing about this is a new building. Cleaning it's going to be a lot easier than some of the older facilities that we have. And so I don't know if they take into account the age of a building or if it's just, hey, X amount of square feet or X amount of bathrooms or whatever, and this is how we do it. So we'll have a little more of a grasp of that once we get the proposals figured out. So let's talk about library just for a minute. And Sherry, if you want to talk about philosophically why some of the libraries are going to a fine list, and then we'll talk about what that means as far as budget's concerned. So.
Yeah, we did talk about this a little bit at the retreat. And the main reason to do this is to bring people back to the library who have left. There are a lot of people who, once they get some fines accruing, they just don't come back. And one of the people on our library board said, yeah, actually the other day I was standing in line to check out and the woman in front of me went to check out or the 5-year-old was putting it in the robot checkout and it came up saying they had fines and the mom said, leave them there, we're leaving, we can't get them. And the little girl started crying and they left the library without the books. Those types of things happen all the time. And staff deals with people, I mean, that's a big part of what our staff deals with, actually, is people who find out they have fines and are upset about it.
Gary, how much do we have in outstanding fines?
And that is a good question, and I'm not sure.
I'm sure it's thousands. I mean, literally thousands.
Or
Right.
how much do we collect a year?
Collected about 23,018.
Is that more or less than you expected?
Collected 23,000.
Yeah, 5 cents a book per day or whatever.
10 cents.
10 cents a book per day.
What gets most people is the DVDs, actually. And that's something we're looking at, too, is if we decide not to do this, we are thinking maybe we want to reduce the fine on DVDs because they're $1 a day overdue. And so if you check out 10, that adds up really quick.
We have quite a few out there. Believe it or not, yes. I mean,
Yes, we have a lot of DVDs.
DVDs are expensive to replace. Books are expensive to replace.
Yeah, DVDs are no more expensive than books.
What is our expense on replacement?
Do we have many
Like
that?
if they're not going to return them, how
So
much
if
would
they
it
don't
cost?
return them, then, so that's a different thing. Then it goes to what we call lost status. And so we do charge for that. Once it reaches, it's been out a certain length of time and not returned, then changed in the system to lost, and they are charged for the book.
So is the 23,000 including lost?
No.
How much revenue do we get every year on lost stuff?
I don't know, but since it's separate, that would go up a tiny bit of what we would take in for that, because some of these would be moved to lost status, but probably not a lot different than what it's right now.
Sherry and I looked at the miscellaneous revenue, and it's kind of convoluted because everything else goes in there, and we collected about $6,700. There's other stuff in there.
And what is your budget for replacement items every year?
We don't have a separate budget for that. We just have certain budgets for certain areas.
How much do you think you spend annually on new books, replacement books, that kind of stuff?
About 60 or 70,000.
Yeah, books is 70, but that would include everything. Yeah, I couldn't tell you specifically how much we spend on replacing lost books.
So if we didn't have the fines, we would just have to eat the 23,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, so that becomes the numbers discussion.
Is there a benefit other than having people come back, right? Is there any other ancillary benefits to that?
Goodwill.
Okay.
Community relations. Customer service.
Do a lot of people complain about the fines?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, a lot. And we have one person who's part-time. It used to be Ronnie. Remember, she retired fairly recently. No, I'm not talking about you, Diana.
There, we had one.
Diana,
let's
I
pull up
have
Diana's
no idea
delinquent
how much
accounts.
your
The
fines were.
Diana alone is 10,000.
Let's make sure we get that paid tonight.
I am going to go through my library and find out.
But we do have one employee who spends probably 10 hours a week just working with people on fines.
What does that mean?
So a message will go out to them through email or mail saying, "This, you owe this much." And so then they call in and
Become collections.
yeah.
And is there
So they'll call and say, "Please waive it," and then we have to deal with, the excuses and the, when is it okay and when is it not? It gets really messy for that person. And
So if we eliminated the fines, what would that person do?
well, she would still work with the lost item fines. But we
plenty
have
of work
plenty
be
for her to
done that
do.
We can plug them in.
Sure.
And she would be thrilled to do other things.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
What other
Just trying to
libraries are doing this?
Salt Lake City, the full system is doing it and has been doing it for about 2 years. And of course, they're not talking $23,000 a year. They're talking $90,000 a year, something like that they just lost, but chose to do it for the community good.
Are there any other local libraries around here, like Orem, Provo?
Eagle Mountain is the most local. Eagle Mountain and Tooele are doing it.
Here's my concern. The fine, in my mind, I don't know whether this is in your mind, but in my mind, the fines serve really two purposes. Number one, to make sure that those books are accessible to other patrons
Right.
that want, and then to deter them from, quote unquote, stealing them, right? Or just never returning them. There's an incentive to get that product back. It concerns me if we just eliminate it. Will our I don't know what the word is. Abandon rate. What is it in city language?
Salt Lake City researched that specifically.
If we have Bark Park up here that's behind you, the book's behind you. If somebody takes that and there's not an incentive for them to bring it back, we may lose Bark Park.
Well, they do have an incentive because they'll have to buy the book if they don't bring it back. It does. Yeah, there's not the 10-cent a day fine.
At what point do I need to buy that book?
So that is still to be determined. Right now, it has to be quite overdue. Not that long, but like 6 weeks overdue. I don't remember the exact date it is right now, and that we may change depending on what we decide here. But what Salt Lake, they looked into it quite a bit, that very question you're talking about, what's the incentive? And they found that the fines don't work as an incentive, that people do not choose whether to return things based on whether they're going to get a fine or not.
What is the maximum fine on Bart Park?
10 cents a day?
It's 10 cents a day, and
Until it reaches the cost of the book?
For a certain number of days. And
So
I
it's not-
should
it's not
have,
based
sorry,
upon-
I don't have that on me.
It's not based upon the dollar amount of the item.
No.
Once it goes to lost, yes, it is. You buy the book.
So the book was $10.
Currently, you buy the book plus you pay a certain amount of overdue fines plus a $5 processing fee.
But then is it frustrating for the people who are waiting 6 weeks for the book if it never comes back at all?
Well, that, like I was saying, what Salt Lake found is it made no difference whatsoever on whether the book came back or not.
The fines aren't high enough to really motivate somebody to bring them back.
Yeah,
So either
they don't affect
they're
whether
just gonna
people bring them back.
because all of a sudden they looked and this book's been sitting in my house for 3 weeks. They don't necessarily care that it's going to be $2.85. It's I better
Right.
take
People
this
are
back.
responsible or they're not. The fines don't seem to determine that, whether they're going to be.
At first blush, I kind of thought, oh yeah, let's just eliminate the fines. But I'm thinking of the second person, right, that wants to have the book, and then I'm thinking $23,000 in fines and the replacement costs that we have to buy
Yes.
once it goes to lost.
We should be.
What is our collection rate on lost books? On the collection, a percentage of our lost account.
I don't know the exact percentage, but
My-
but like I said,
I'll bet we don't. I mean, I'll bet we don't.
No, we don't get 100%.
No.
No,
So
of course we don't.
There's still a loss there.
Sure, but like I said, the number of books that get returned is the same, and at the same pace. So people don't just say, I'm going to keep this the full 6 weeks because they can. Statistically, that's not what they've seen.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing her say is really nothing changes. It's just that we're now out.
In terms of book
23,000.
availability.
Well,
So-
but-
A lot. That's the contract.
But-
That's the contract plan.
But that's the part I want to
Daniel.
address.
right.
Is philosophically, that's one way to do it. And that probably could be a good customer service friendly way to go. But in this year's budget, for us to carve out another $23,000 probably isn't in the cards. Is that something we can consider next year? Maybe. But for this year, because we're still out of balance, $30-some thousand. My recommendation would be is that we just kind of stick with the plan right now and keep that on our minds as we continue to figure out how we want to do that moving
And
forward.
maybe Sherry, we ought to figure out a different way. If fines don't work, is there another way? Can we think outside the box to
Another way to what?
recoup that money, redo the fines a different way, lost a different way? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking.
Maybe increase the fines, but the fines don't kick in until it's been 14 days.
Something like that. Yeah, right. So that and let's, I don't know.
Okay, but we're trying to help the community,
Yeah.
and increasing fines doesn't have that effect.
So, I just want to say this.
I don't either.
I can't get a book.
And some people do feel like they're double taxed that way.
But then we have your
The responsibility.
but then there's a late fee at the rec center if you don't sign up on time. There's a late fee at the pool, and then there's a late fee. I
It's
mean,
not double taxation.
Yeah,
it's
you
just
gotta-
No, it's not.
it's just part of.
You got to return your items.
Yes, but
And I
That's life. That's right.
and I agree. I don't know
Yeah,
if
you
we
can't
should be
speed,
if we
or
should
you
be.
get a fine.
I mean, where do we? If we're gonna start, then you could have something like I said. Someone come and say, "Well, I was late registration. I have to pay $10 more at the pool at the rec center." I mean, there's a lot of programs where if you don't get it in on time and then meet the deadline, then there's
There's a consequence. There's
And I don't know if it's our role to
I don't know if
eat the
it's
23,000.
I don't like it when a kid is.
So here's outside the box. What if we say here's $5,000. Wipe out those fines that you feel like you need to from library staff, and we'll give her a budget of $5,000, and it's up to her to wipe out
To waive.
those fees.
Or.
Right, so if there's
no fines on,
Yeah,
no
or
fines,
just
no fines on kids' books.
Do we,
Double the adult.
do we still do the cans of food when they bring them in to
Give
waive?
food for fines,
fine.
yes.
Yeah, something like that. Just, that's what I'm thinking outside the box.
I don't like a fine on a kid book.
So,
I was the bad mom at school lunch. What's really bad, they don't let your kids eat. I was one of those parents that.
They stamp their hand.
They let them eat one day, and then like the next day you're on your own, and they're ruthless, man. I know. So it is kind of crazy, like when you.
Because the schools can't pay for
well,
it.
and that's just it. And so, when the
And remember, a
5-year-old
late
can't get
book
the
isn't
book, that's
costing
not
us
our
anything
issue,
extra.
That's the mom's issue.
The mom's issue.
Yeah,
And
and
if-
so,
The food at school lunch, somebody has to pay for. A
Yeah.
late book, the book's already been paid for.
But in the end, it is the 23,000 that we're collecting from that, and
Right.
then also the people waiting in line for the book. So it does affect someone somewhere.
yeah,
It's not affecting people waiting in line. It doesn't affect that whatsoever.
But if
So-
they lose the book and don't have an incentive to return it before that,
But that would happen anyway.
so really, let me sum it up, I guess, is how I see this, is we have a decision.
But it
Our
wouldn't have
decision
been brought
is,
back
are we going to
anyway.
create the goodwill and go fineless, and then look at our list here and pull something off this list to accommodate the 23,000? Or are we going to stick with the 23,000, kick it back to Sherry to try to, because I don't know what the alternative, I can't think of something right now, this moment, there's a way to do this, because cash is just cash. And that $23,000 is actual cash that we spend.
Half a person.
Let's look at it this way. Let's say that there was never another late book ever. Right? We would lose the 23,000.
That's right.
But what would that do for the library and for the citizens?
The book would always be available when somebody comes in to check it out.
Correct. Could be. Yeah, it will be. I mean, unless it's checked out.
If
right?
they turn it in on time.
They turn out on time?
Then people know, hey, it's going to be in that day.
And is that benefit that we are giving our citizens worth the $23,000 cost that we would pay as a reduction of the revenue from our book fines? Well, if we have $23,000 and all of a sudden it goes to zero because everybody's returning it, is that benefit to our citizens that every book is now available worth the $23,000 opportunity cost because we just reduced our $23,000 cost? Does that make sense? Does that make sense, everybody?
I don't know what world you're living in.
She's looking good another job, so she can pay her fine.
I don't think at this point it makes sense to eliminate the fines. If there's something else we can do, a fund or to give you to make it hardship elimination, fine. But I have a hard time from a financial
So
state.
for the purposes of this year, we're not going to implement that into the budget. Okay, and so let's keep
and I'm
chasing.
interested too.
discussion.
I mean, I'd like to see if other libraries start implementing this. Why are they not? If we do see someone crying in line because they can't return it, if someone sees that, then let's see if there is a way we can help them. I think there's a way we can do it on a kind of case by case.
So part of this is saying, okay,
I don't
we
wanna
are
see
going
that
to
either.
create a little bit of a fund here that we can just turn around and waive that in that moment. Now,
So
at that point, somebody has to adjudicate it, and at that point, we could be accused of playing favorites and giving our friends this and not others.
Yeah,
and
so
it
when-
becomes difficult.
sorry, didn't.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So
Sorry.
when I started here, I got it felt like a million phone calls a day from patrons. So April did this constantly. So patrons would call and say, I have this fine and I can't pay it. And April would routinely cut it in half, the fine, if they asked. Now, I didn't like dealing with that. For one, I don't like being the mean person, and I don't feel like it's really fair because that person had the guts to call. They get half off, whereas someone like me would just pay the fine, the full fine. I wouldn't be the person to call and ask for that. So we made a form that people could fill out if they wanted it waived. You know, they could say, I had this hardship, whatever it was, you know, I was hospitalized, and we deal with those one at a time. So we do have, you know, something happening right now for those hardship cases. But that is also really difficult to say you get it and you don't.
I know, but this is why you get paid the big bucks being library director, Sherry. So you get to determine that.
I've got one more question. How much would be our current accounts receivables for fines? Like if you were to add up all of the fines right now,
You mean the loss
how much would the patrons owe
Or
us?
owed that haven't been paid yet.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
not
and you
from
asked me that
receivable.
before. I don't have that answer.
Like a
I'd
million.
have
And we
to.
can figure that
I'd have
out.
to research that.
But I'll bet it's thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it would have to be.
What if we occasionally just waived it and sent everybody a
Cleared
note
everybody.
and said
Well,
we're going to go back to zero. Just bring it back.
See, I don't necessarily like that because then they're going to get this notice and they're going to think next time, oh, I'm good.
5 years.
Yeah, it's like we're good. I
That's
think
like-
I
it's
think
like
that's
amnesty, right?
confusing.
I just think there's
Here's the deal. It's just
I think there's some other ways that we could do it. Anyway.
We'll work on it.
All right.
Okay.
Okay,
moving on.
can we move on?
Yep.
So, because we're running out of time in our work session, there's a couple other items. I want to talk about this potential 3% increase in this potential position. That discussion's going to take a few minutes. So, as we get into our council meeting, we just have the one item. We'll take care of the item, then we'll come back and revisit the budget. Since we just have a minute, I want to go over our schedule for our recreation director position so that we're all on the same page and get a little feedback on when we can kind of make our final decision. So this job is now closed as of today. Kyler, I don't want to violate HIPAA, but he's not feeling well. And so, but he told me that there were, I think, 29 applications as of noon when he left. And I'm assuming we got a couple more. What he is doing is he is printing those out, scanning them in, and then he's going to email all of you a copy of all of the applications. What we would like by Friday, really probably by 5 o'clock Friday, is for you to send in your top 10 as you review the applications.
Like this Friday, like in 2 days?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're going to have to move a little bit. We want to keep to a timeline. Once we get those and we figure out, as staff, we'll kind of figure out, because not everybody's going to have the same 10 names. And so we'll try to figure out exactly, what that's going to look like in regards to who we actually interview. And so staff will put that together. We'll work with the mayor and put that together. And then it's URPA next week, which we will have some of our candidates are going to be down in St. George. For those that are potential interviewees that aren't going to be in St. George, I would think we would interview some of them next week. So we might have 2 different interview days.
No.
It is warmer down there.
It is.
So we'll kind of put the schedule together. We had 4 council members that have an interest of actually sitting in on the interviews. We can have 2 of you at a time. Unless we noticed it as a meeting, I would just prefer that we have 2 of you. My main preference would be we have the same 2 for all the interviews, but I understand if some of you want to sit on part of them and others sit in on another part, that's okay too. Because ultimately we want to take that 10 that we're going to interview and get it down to 2 or 3 or 4 and then bring that back for the whole elected officials to interview. So we'll do a day next week, and then I'm going to shoot for Monday the week after, which is the 18th, to capture those that are at URPA. So that Monday we would interview whichever ones were missing. My initial intention is that we would turn around and bring back our top 3 or whatever the next day, the 19th. But we have that agenda is getting pretty big. And so that could be a long night. So either we can bite the bullet and have a long night, because each of these interviews will be an hour.
I think the bite the bullet instead of having to wait a whole other.
Well, or we could do it the 20th. I mean, we could do it the Wednesday the next day, but then you would all need to come back.
Yeah, I'd rather be here and get
Okay.
it done too.
So so we're looking at 8 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, and a 10 o'clock interview. So that's the problem with the 19th is it could.
That's long. That's
10 o'clock's probably not fair for a candidate.
It's not fair for.
Fine.
Remember when we used to go
Well,
weekly
it's
until
but you're
midnight?
asking.
But we're
you're
bringing
asking.
people in.
You're asking a candidate.
I know. It is true.
Yeah, and it's not fair for a candidate to
let's
try to
not do
interview
that.
at 10 o'clock.
What's that? Well, because we could have 4 candidates when it's all said and done. So what I'm asking is if we just did it the next day, if we
Could we
did
even
it the
do like
20th.
on Monday?
It would be Wednesday. So we have a meeting on Tuesday the 19th. Then you guys would come back the next day on the 20th, and we would just do interviews that night.
But I'm saying why not on Monday?
The 18th?
Yeah.
Actually, the 20th is good for me.
Well, the problem with the 18th is we're not going to know who our candidates are until we do those interviews
Okay.
on the 18th. We're going to tell all the candidates, if we know that is 20th doesn't work for you,
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can we do the interviews on
Maybe
Monday?
that's- But maybe that's okay. I mean, you'll still be involved in the
the
final.
first one would be at as soon as you can get here, so 5, 6, and 7. If we wanted to do 6, 7, and 8, if you, okay, well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be in the evening to accommodate your schedules. So we could do 6, 7, and 8 on Wednesday night. And then we'll tell the candidates, every candidate we're going to interview, just keep this night open because this is when we're doing final interviews. So does the 20th work then?
Yeah.
Okay, so put that in your calendars that we'll do the rec interviews that night. And then when we come back into city council session, we'll finish up on the budget, and then I have a couple other items as well. So 6 o'clock. All right, Mayor, so let's.
Okay, we'll have a 5-minute recess, and gonna have a motion that we come out,
I'll make a motion to adjourn our work session.
we have a motion, we have a second, all those in favor say aye.